Working with characters was a lot of fun, and each character was different. But I got to work with all sorts of different Disney characters while I was there. Here's what it was like. Of course, when you work as a photographer at Disney, you're going to work with different Disney characters. You'll have the regular ones like Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy, but there's a huge variety of characters and a huge variety of personalities and things that you're going to encounter while you're working with them. Of course, we already know that working with Chip and Dale, they're going to constantly cause trouble and mischief, especially if Donald's around, because they love to antagonize him. Mickey is a gentleman, the gentleman's gentleman, and treats everybody with wonderful dignity. Minnie is a bit of a flirt and a cook and loves the ladies. Donald is very angry, especially if he sees anything with Mickey, because Donald believes that he's number one and not Mickey. If you get Donald and Mickey together, it always creates a real interesting situation. I can remember one time that I ended up at the very front of the park where we had Donald and Mickey and Minnie out greeting guests as they came into Magic Kingdom. And due to illnesses, we were losing cast member attendance to help. And we ended up with all three of them together. Donald, of course, is constantly competing with Mickey because it's Mickey's park, but Donald thinks it should be his. And Mickey's trying to be a gentleman while having to deal with Donald. Minnie's flirting with all these guys because she wants a ring from Mickey and hasn't gotten one yet. And so then Mickey starts responding to Minnie's flirting, and he starts flirting with the girls, and then Donald's trying to steal the girls from Mickey, and it just turned into a bunch of chaos. But it was so much fun because they all got to show their personalities in such a way, interacting with each other. But most of the time, Mickey was just a wonderful gentleman, very kind and sweet to everybody. And Donald, as long as you didn't show him anything that had Mickey on it, was a lot of fun. And of course, meeting the princesses, they're always so sweet and gentle, and they're princesses after all, they're royalty. And the girls would just come in, and when you have a little girl come up and meet one of them, they would usually just kind of hug on them. They might be intimidated. Occasionally you'd see one that would give a curtsy, but they would just sit there in awe next to the princesses. They were just amazed that they were in their presence. Little boys, when they would occasionally come up, would be hysterically funny because they've got this beautiful girl in front of them, but of course it's a girl and they're a boy, and ew, icky. But at the same time, they're enthralled. And one of the really fun things that we would see sometimes is when the princesses would give these little boys a kiss. They didn't do it very often, but every now and then, and you would watch this little boy walk away with lipstick on his cheek. And of course, back in Toontown, they would actually have 3 princesses in the room. And so you would occasionally have this little boy that was just really adorably cute walk out, and he'd have one here and one there and one there, and it was just a lot of fun, especially since he'd be blushing almost as bright as the lipstick was. But there were a lot of other characters out there as well. Aladdin and Jasmine, for example, were a lot of fun. They would meet in Adventureland at Magic Kingdom or over at Epcot over in the Morocco Pavilion. They would just have a great time, especially when Genie showed up, because, Genie's a little bit of a nut. Did you know that Genie can actually autograph books without touching them? He'd do this sometimes when he was out there with Aladdin and Jasmine. They would hold up the autograph book for Genie, he'd sign in the air, and then they'd close the book, and poof, there was the autograph. It was a really neat thing to watch, and people would just be like, wow, how'd Genie do that? They would have a lot of fun, and Genie, of course, was always out there stirring up a little bit of trouble that Aladdin and Jasmine would have to pull him out of. So when you could get the 3 of them together, it was a lot of fun. I also had a whole lot of fun working with Ariel back when they had Ariel's Grotto at the Magic Kingdom. They had a big water play area, and then you had kind of this little path on the side, and you would go into a cave, and you could meet Ariel there. Ariel, because she's not used to our world, is a little bit of a ditz with things. I mean, after all, she calls a fork a dinglehopper and thinks it's to do her hair. So Ariel would be rather gullible sometimes, and people would be able to pull little pranks on her and introduce her to something new that she thought was fantastic that wasn't all that great. There were at least as many adults who wanted to meet Ariel as there were kids. It would be guys and girls. The guys because they're with the mermaid, and hey, how cool is that? But the ladies love to meet her too. Here's a fun little trivia fact for you. Because of the different lighting and the way the place was set up, and the way we had our camera set up, we would actually focus on her belly button first and then compose the rest of the picture. Because her belly button would kind of be the center of everybody, and so it would give you your best focus spot. Didn't always focus on that, But it was the easiest way to make sure that your picture was in perfectly clear focus. Yeah, nice, funny little trivia point for you. Not every photographer did that, but some of us did. And of course, if you wanted to meet Winnie the Pooh and his friends, they were always extremely popular. They would meet at Animal Kingdom. They'd meet over by the Winnie the Pooh ride. They actually had a little forest over there for them at that time. And then they would meet in the back of the store in the UK pavilion at Epcot as well. Pooh was one character that if people were afraid of characters, they would love Pooh, especially little kids. They would just hold on and hug him. And of course, everybody loved Eeyore because, Eeyore was so sad and so many of us identify with that. And Tigger would just bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. And Tigger, stop bouncing so I can take the picture, please. The only problem I really had with the meeting spot at the UK pavilion was the fact it was in the back of a store, and that line sometimes could get a little long, and then you've got this line in the middle of a store, and most of the time it wasn't too bad because they were sort of hidden, and so people would have to look for them. But the characters were just a ton of fun. We loved meeting with Pooh and Tigger and Eeyore, and we did on several occasions. And of course, everybody knows about Toy Story. Woody and Buzz would be out quite often. At Magic Kingdom, Buzz Lightyear would show up over in Tomorrowland while Woody would be over in Frontierland. But if you go over to the Toy Story area at Hollywood Studios, they would oftentimes be together there. That created some interesting situations because as good of friends as they are, they're also rivals. They're constantly trying to show each other who's the best and who's in charge and who knows better. And the guests would get caught up in this sometimes. But one of the neatest things about working with them was when you would have the kids that would walk up and they would have their Woody and Buzz Lightyear dolls. And they'd want to introduce their toys to the actual toys. That was just always a neat moment. You would see them occasionally autograph themselves. Kind of sounds weird, doesn't it? But just a really neat moment. They were favorites of the little boys. Boys loved to meet them. And of course, there were characters out there that really were kind of more for just the little kids. All the characters are open to meeting adults. And adults love to go meet them. So if you're an adult, don't be afraid to go meet the characters. But there are definitely some that are more of a kid's character. At Hollywood Studios at the time, they had an area where the little Einsteins would come out and JoJo's Circus. And these are definitely little kids shows. And so you would have a lot more little kids that would want to meet them. JoJo at the time had just a little trailer, not a great meeting place. Little Einsteins had kind of a corner set up and it was a little better, not a whole lot. But the kids had a ball meeting them. The lines for them often weren't very long, and the kids would come up, and the kids, because they'd watched the shows, knew the songs and knew the music, and so the kids would come up and they would sing with them and they would dance with them and just had a great time. You'd watch little kids just love these characters because it's who they got to see on TV all the time. So that was a lot of fun watching little kids' heroes show up. But another set of characters that little kids in particular loved, along with adults, that was very hard to take photos of was Lightning McQueen and Mater from Cars. They would come out in the parks and meet people. They would occasionally drive around in the parade. Every now and then they would have meet and greet set up for them. Hollywood Studios down in Florida was where they did this for a little while. They were a very hard photo to take. Because they're so much bigger than people, it would be difficult to be able to get them, all of them, in a photo along with the people and not have the people either look really small or be chopping out parts of the car. Or if you had a large group posing, then you're trying to make sure that they're not hiding the car completely. Trying to get your sizes adjusted for that could be very difficult. The other thing that was very hard was because they're cars, outside of some vrooms and some shaking and noises, there really wasn't a whole lot of interaction. So as a photographer, they were kind of a bummer to get stuck with. They were also out in an unshaded area, so you would be expecting to be hot, sunny, bored, and tired while working with them. Lots of kids love to get their pictures with them, but it was just not a great place as a photographer. Mr. Incredible was a lot of fun to work with as well. He loved in particular to mess around with the guys, because men in general constantly like to, show how studly and macho they are. And, especially once you get these guys that are in their late teens and 20s and, they all think that they're really cool. And then you get Mr. Huge Muscles, Mr. Incredible. And he'd come up and he'd start feeling people's arms and shaking his head and laughing. Especially if you could tell it was somebody that just, really kind of had that attitude that they were all that. And Mr. Incredible loved to humble him a little bit. You're nothing there, nothing there, or maybe a lot more there than you should. So he loved to, do the big strength superhero poses. Get the guys doing that, pose, and then laugh. Although there were occasionally guys that could hold their own with them. And then you could just kind of see the admiration. Wow, that's impressive. And you see the guys that had definitely been working out, Mr. Incredible would be just kind of patting them going, yep, you're good. One of the characters that I got to spend a lot of time with, though, was Mulan. Mulan, of course, is over in China, and Mulan was very independent. Mulan, of course, was a martial artist, so she would have a lot of older adults who loved to come and pose with the martial arts bit. Get the kung fu poses, and the girls would love to come and sit with her. She'd sit down on the ground outside the Chinese temple and just talk and spend time. And being from ancient China, she had this wealth of knowledge and a wealth of stories, and people just loved to talk with her about it. Being in the China Pavilion, too, of course, she had the big Chinese temple behind her, and that's actually where we went when it rained, was actually inside the temple. And it creates for some great backdrops and photos inside there as well. One of the things, though, that was so irritating when working with Mulan was when people would walk by and go, "Hey, look at the geisha." She's not a geisha. Geisha are Japanese, Mulan is Chinese. And trust me, she has nothing in common with what a geisha does. Mulan is not geisha. The country's right. Ugh. But some of my absolute favorites to shoot, although it was rare opportunities, were the villains. Back in the days when the Hat was at Hollywood Studios, about 2 hours before Fantasmic, there was one quick meet and greet where the characters were on their way to Fantasmic and they would stop and meet people. And there were several of the villains that would show up there. Cruella de Vil was one of the most hysterical. And while we normally didn't get to shoot her, we would kind of fight to get the opportunity or just conveniently forget which character we were supposed to be shooting. And so we would try to get Cruella if we could. Cruella was just hysterical. She would make people pose, stand there and go, "Puppies!" If somebody had a picture of a dog on their shirt, she would constantly go, "How can I make this into a coat?" Just so much fun, especially if somebody came by with an assistance dog. Then Cruella had this really mixed reaction because she's loving on the dog, but at the same time she's trying to figure out how she could turn it into a coat, because that's what she does. She made for some hysterical interaction. But some of the other villains could also be so much fun to work with. I've mentioned Vidya the fairies in a lot of cases. While Vidya's not a villain per se, she definitely was kind of an antagonist of Tinkerbell, and she didn't hesitate to show that either. One of my favorites to work with, though, was Captain Hook and Smee. Captain Hook was forever looking for ways to cause trouble. He would poke people as they walked by and then point at Mr. Smee and blame him. He would drop things and then point at Mr. Smee and blame him. He would basically do pretty much whatever he could and point at Mr. Smee. Somebody come by with a Mickey hat, he might hook it and stick it somewhere that the kid couldn't get to it. It was just forever looking for ways to bother people. And of course, as a photographer, you never know what they're going to do, so you've got this mix of protecting the character and protecting the guests from the character and trying to help everybody. And at the same time, you're laughing behind your camera, so it could be a lot of fun. But it could be hard sometimes because you're trying not to shake the camera. All in all, though, working with characters was a blast. It was always a lot of fun watching them interact with the guests and the guests interact with them and telling their stories, being part of their story, and just watching what would happen next, because it would rarely be a dull moment outside of the cars. It was constantly new, constantly changing, constantly fun. While I love shooting pictures of the icons like the castle and the locations, the characters are easily the highlight of the job as Photopass. If you haven't met them yet, go meet them. You'll love it. I promise they'll make it fun for you, regardless of how old or young you may be. Because Disney is for kids of all ages. It's whether you're a kid inside. So I hope you had a little fun listening to some of my stories here and favorites about the characters. If you enjoyed it, please don't hesitate to like the video, share it with others, leave your comments below. I'd love to hear from you as well. So here's what it was like to work with several of the Disney... who love to come and pose with the martial arts bit. Yeah, get the... While she's not a Vidya, she was... Well, she's not a Vidya. Yeah, she's a Vidya.